assembling the caliper. It's back here. I already compressed the pistons. The hose wasn't collapsed or clogged. The pistons put back just as they should, so we don't have a problem there.
Sailor ain't got no cigarettes, but trailer for sale.
I'm using a 1 5/8. There's a little bit of play in there. I think a 41 millimeter probably fits a little bit better, but I don't have a 41 millimeter.
Oh, sailor trailer for sailor
Bearing. You have your washer that has a tang on it that lines up with a spline in the spindle itself. As far as the spindle, I always just wipe all the grease off.
Trailer for sailor
I always just try to go through and wipe any residual metal debris or metal dust from braking, stuff that gets flipped up on the road. I always give that a wipe down. What we normally do is we just use a torch, we heat up the outside, we flip it upside down and drop it, the ring just falls off. These, I tried that earlier and it was not working. These ABS tone rings in here are on there quite a bit tighter. So what I had to do, actually, they do make a specific tool. I don't know the J part number or any of that, but we do have a 3-jaw puller that I had to modify. The ends of it were pretty thick like this, and I actually had to grind them down flat and a lot more thin. That way they could actually recess into the holes provided in the tone ring so that I can pop this out. Again, they do make a specific tool for the job, but this works just fine. The only thing is I used an adjustable wrench earlier across the middle to support the bolt that bolted for the extractor, and it just completely bent that wrench. Now, thankfully, this does have a lifetime guarantee on it. Good thing, because that was brand new.
Trailer for sailor
That wrench was not near the quality of the one that I just used, so I'm gonna have to figure something else out.
Trailer for sailor rooms to let. Trailer for sailor ain't got no. Trailer for sailor
There's the inner lip where it's pressed on. The part that's folded in is going to face towards the outside of the rotor.
King of the road. Trailer
Inner bearing. I'm going to clean even the newer grease that's in there. If there's a lot, I'll leave some of it, but I'm definitely going to try to get all the black grease out of there as much as I can. Alright, from there we're going to remove the, I believe it's 12 bolts actually holding the rotor to the hub assembly.
Trailer for sailor ain't got no.
Sometimes it takes a little persuasion, but the rotor will lift off just like that. We'll start by trying to get as much of the old grease off of here as I can.
Trailer for sailor
And then just insert it, taper it in down.
Sailor ain't got no cigarette.
As you can see, it forced the old grease out. All the dark, dirty grease is on the top, and clean red grease is coming out.
Sailor
It's not the cleanest job, but I'll take this new grease, I'll wipe it on the outside of the bearings, and I'll put my fingers through there and just spin the actual bearing itself from the inner race, just to try to get some of that grease all over those roller bearings onto the exterior bearing.
Oh, sailoring.
I'm going to take this residual grease that's in there and go ahead and put a coat on the spindle.
Cigarettes, but trailer. Oh, sailoring.
But same procedure.
Don't pay no trailer. Oh, sailoring. Trailer. Oh, sailoring.
Now we can install our inner bearing. Get that in there, kind of press from all sides. Make sure it's seated correctly. And then we need to install our new seal. I always like to match them up before I go installing them and ruining them. Inside diameter looks the same, the outside looks the same. Now, they make specific tools. Don't bust my balls, I know that. But sometimes you don't have to overcomplicate things. I mean, how many of you actually use a ball joint separator or a tie rod separator to separate tie rods? Next to nobody. Unless you're making a video and you want to please everybody and make sure nobody has anything bad to say. I just use a block of wood. If you just go and put it on there and give it one big smack, typically it overseats on one side. So I'm trying to keep that from run my finger over the top. This side's still a little bit high. Now that's pretty even all the way around. These rotors are a higher carbon rotor. They're completely painted. I've heard a lot of controversy on the cleaning of rotors. Myself, I always clean with brake clean, so I will still give these a little bit of a wipe down because they're gonna have some material left over from the manufacturing plant. So even if you're gonna see some fingerprints and grease on there, I will wipe them down completely. You want to make sure your mating service for the rotor to the hub is clean. You don't need rocks or anything on there. And that will slide right down. Tolerance on these rotors is pretty accurate, but when it comes to if you have an application where you have multiple bolts and put one thing on, I always hand start all of them first. There's nothing worse than going through, tightening some down, getting to the end, and you have just one bolt that doesn't fit, and you have to go back through, loosen them all, just save some time, make sure they all hand start, and then go through. I'm gonna hit these down initially with the impact just to get them all seated, then I'll go through and torque them.
King of the road. King of the road.
For the seal or the tone ring, I just put it in place. It does have a lip down in here where you cannot overseat the tone ring. The tone ring will go all the way down and sit flush against the hub. That's where it's supposed to be. As long as you get it tapped down to where it doesn't move anymore, you've got it in the right spot. Place the rolled end facing the outside. And I prefer to use just like a 6-inch 3/8 extension. It has a lip. I can tap on the top. It doesn't take a whole lot of force. You don't want to do one side too much because then you risk warping or bending the tone ring. And then once you go to drive it, you're going to set an ABS code for implausibility, intermittent signal, something of the sort. And I can tell by the noise that it's making that it's fully seated. I'm just going to go around one more time. Race fruit that goes on for the seal or the spacer. It does have a tapered end and it has a flatter outside. That part's going to go outside. You don't want to have the tapered end part because the bearing itself is not going to sit evenly and flushly across this tapered end. You want to have the flat area facing out.
King of the road.
I got my spindle lubricated. I've got everything greased on the inside. I got the seal in, I got the tone ring. I'm gonna go ahead and place the rotor and hub assembly up on the spindle. It's gonna have a lot of end play. If you rock it, you'll feel it seat onto that inner race that the seal sits around. I put, if you don't hold pressure on the top, it'll start to slide off and angle down. I hold it up. Align the tang on the washer with the spline on the spindle itself. Now, what I prefer to do, I always rotate the hub and the bearings in the opposite direction while I kind of rotate the nut back and forth to help give it an initial seat. 80 foot-pounds, back off 90, or spin 3 times, back it off 90, and then tighten it back up to 11 pounds. Okay, with the 82, that's just fine. Now, so give it 3 forward turns. I'm gonna do a couple more. That just sets the preload on the bearings. Now, back it off. You don't necessarily have to do 90. That's in the instructions, but as long as you do something close, it's going to be just hand tight. Okay. And at 11, there's the horizontal drill hole for the cotter pin, and then the vertical one. My vertical one's closer. If I were to use the horizontal, I would have to tighten that nut even more, and you don't want to do that. This barely, I don't even know how many degrees it is, but just slight reduction in the torque is not going to make that much of a difference. There's typically a tiny bit of play in bearings like this anyway. So I'm just backing off the hair. And then when it comes to center caps, I have a very strong dislike for people that just grab a hammer and bash them on, especially because this truck does not have any center caps for wheels covering this, and nobody wants to see their center caps, their grease caps dented and all marred up. So I always use a rubber mallet. And then again with my 6-inch extension, I like how I can hit one end and the other end has that lip. My next step is going to be to clean the machine spots in the bracket for the brake hardware. Rust can build up and you don't even realize how thick it is. The next thing you know, you're fighting to get a brake pad on. And even after that, the wire wheel, wire brush didn't get the corners and the little sharp right angle machine slots in here. So I'm just going to use my file. I did already lubricate the slide pins. Here, we like to use the purple ceramic brake parts lubricant. It always holds up, even 5 years later when the cars come back, when they need brakes again, if necessary. It's still purple, it does get a little dirty, but it's very much still a lubricant. It doesn't break down. I want to say it's probably 20 bucks a bottle, but we use that on every brake job, no matter what. We always do the slide pins, we install the hardware, we lubricate the hardware, and we also take it a step further here, just because we don't want any comebacks, and we also do a light coat across the backing pad. What I've noticed personally, and this isn't necessarily why we do it, I've just noticed it over the years of us using this, that when customers whose brakes we have done come back, that backing plate isn't deteriorating, it's not falling apart, it hasn't slidden off and touching the rotor, causing a noise. This lubricant also helps keep that from deteriorating. Just one less problem in the future for the customer to be unhappy when they bring the car back for a brake noise. So if we can keep a problem from happening, that's what we're going to do. We're going to try our hardest to make sure that always happens. Just remember, nobody really remembers how good of a job you did all the times you did a good job, but they will always remember that one time they had to bring the car back.
Trailer for sailor rent.
Brake hardware is directional.
Trailer for sailor rent.
Will only go on properly one way. And a lot of the hardware these days does have like a noise reduction film or a coating on them. We don't buy it, we still lubricate all of the hardware. Any moving surface or point of contact on the brakes.
Sailor rent. Give man to me, by no means. Give the road. King of the road.
Now, our brake pads, as long as everything was cleaned and lubricated properly, they should just fall in place.
Trailer for sailor rent. Ain't got no cigarettes, but trailer for sailor rent.
Just like that.
Man to me, by no means.
Always double check when you're putting the caliper back on. It's real easy when you just set them to the side to pick them up and throw them on. And next thing you know, when you do that, you have a bend in your hose. When they go to turn, it can cause a kink, which would be a reduction in braking power. That could be dangerous for the driver and other passengers on the road. So make sure that you did not get the caliper spun around.
Sailor rent.